From this apology comes a strength renewed to those who fought so long and so hard that this day may come. And I stand before them especially, an openly gay, happily married man who does not let one day go by when I don't thank them in my heart for the fight.
An obviously emotional response to today's apology from the Minister of Veterans Affairs. So what is his government doing to follow up on the apology, and how important is today for LGBTQ2 vets and military members? Minister Seamus ORegan joins me now. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Good to be here, Chris.
You made a point, and I want to start with this, about this was not just about discrimination, about betrayal, it was also about shame.
Yeah.
Why was that so important to you?
Because discrimination is something that's imposed upon you, but I think that the real crime here is that everything that has happened over the decades in successive governments and just the times that we lived in caused people to feel that themselves. I consider myself very lucky, you know, growing up with a very I didn't worry about my family. I didn't worry about coming out to my family, my friends, my community. I didn't worry about that at all. I didn't have to worry about that because of people who fought for it, which is, you know, really, really extraordinary. There's a time when you go through confused in your young life, and because, you know, there are things around you. Tone, it's not just government policies, but the tone that it sets within a community, within any community, even one as progressive as Canada in the 80s, 90s, and in the noughts, that is this right? Am I wrong? Yeah. Am I immoral? Am I lesser? And I think those emotions came forward for me. I can't imagine the emotion of some of the warriors, for lack of a better word, that I saw in that gallery today as we sat in the House and we heard the Prime Minister give this apology and the other party leaders. I mean, these were men and women who fought lonely battles, Chris, lonely battles, going through the 40s, 50s, 60s, and on, and before, and, you know, who never thought this day had come, and it came.
So let's talk about the abilities they have now. The legislation that comes today includes the opportunity to rid their record of these convictions.
Destroy the record. It's really important. I mean, we're not talking a pardon here.
So this has to be at the initiative of the person. Walk us through how will this work?
Well, Minister Goodale, you know, said in the press conference that the process will, you know, it will be initiated by the person, and the government will fast track these initiatives. And by the way, we're also going to be fast tracking them through Veterans Affairs, because there are a number of people who may not know, for their own reasons, some of them self-imposed, that they're entitled to certain benefits through Veterans Affairs.
I was going to say, if you were just honorably discharged, for example, or pushed out of the military, you might have been able, had you been able to continue to entitle yourself to these benefits.
And we've gotten counselors now who are dedicated, who understand these files and the intricacies of these files, so when people call, they'll know exactly how to deal with them. This is a big priority, not only for Minister of National Defense, but also for the Chief of Defense Staff, who both of them took a very personal interest in this. So we've got a work cut out ahead of us to make sure, first and foremost, that people understand that that there's help out there for them now, and that any wrong and any sense of shame that they felt is gone. We want it gone.
Yeah. And you look at it, the Prime Minister made it very clear, livelihoods were destroyed, careers were destroyed. So as you look ahead, I mean, it's hard to predict how this will unfold, but there's $110 million in direct compensation. People can apply for that. It ranges from, I think, $5,000 to $150,000. That's right. It's not nothing, but it does seem hard to kind of quantify what they've gone through.
I think it is, and I think, you know, what Mr. Elliott said about the pardon was enough. I mean, you know, there had to be money there as well, because I think money, you know, I know this through the Veterans Affairs file as well. I mean, money is an acknowledgement of sorts. It's a material acknowledgement. And I think what people want is the recognition that they suffered a damage, significant damage. I mean, the Prime Minister mentioned the choice between your career and your identity, and it's even more heartbreaking. I mean, for some it was career and love. Yeah. You know, it was someone that they were in love with, someone that they wanted to be with, and they were denied that right. I mean, that's something that I wanted to talk about, because for me, this is not just, it's not just a matter of identity, this is a matter of freedom. I mean, if you really take a step back, what were we doing all these decades? Telling people who they can and cannot love.
And forcing them to keep that within, for fear of being prosecuted.
For fear of being prosecuted. I mean, we really have to fundamentally change how we see what happened as well. And, you know, I think when we talk about memorializing some of these people and these actions, maybe we can get into that. That's how I saw it. I mean, you know, to everybody, it's different. I mean, but as an openly gay, happily married man, I can tell you the way I look at it is this is a fundamental, egregious act against freedom. And for me, being allowed to be who I am and being allowed to love who I choose is a fundamental freedom in this country.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about the people you have met in the course of the planning for this day. You must have met some veterans who have told you their stories.
Yeah.
And what stands out for you? I mean, they must have been horrific, but what stands out for you?
The shame. That's why I wanted to talk about that when I spoke, that I just wanted the shame to go. I think that shame leads people to some very dark places and, you know, doubts their esteem. You know, it prevented them from being happy. You know, there's a relationship here to this, and when I talk about mental health in general, with my other hat on, but as minister, I wear both. I mean, you know, it's shame and unhappiness are difficult things for people to live with. This is an emotional day for a lot of people. Yeah. For some, that shame will come to the fore again. You know, they may have been living very happy and fulfilled lives, but they will remember what it was like back then, and that's tough as well.
I was also struck by the Prime Minister's line that nobody ever betrayed their country because of their sexual orientation. Their country betrayed them. Yeah. So if you look ahead to this for young people today, because we mostly are looking at redressing past problems here, what do you tell young gay, lesbian, transgendered people today about what this says about the future life they can have in Canada, particularly the military and the police forces and the federal government? That
they are accepted for who they are and for the talents that they have. But also something else, and if I can portray something you talked about off camera that your dad mentioned. You know, these are fights that happen today. I mean, I said, you know, we won. And today is today's victory for those who are gay, those who were part of that community, for those people who fought the fight, who were in those galleries and across the country, you know, in small towns and in big, who fought these fights over decades. Today's a day of celebration, but it's a day of vigilance, because you don't take it for granted. I mean, I certainly do not take it for granted. I would look into the eyes of people who have fought for my ability to be myself, to love who I choose. And I wanted to say to them today, thank you.
And this is the reason I asked in part was there is money that's set aside for memorials, for, as Katie mentioned, for curricula. You can stamp out official discrimination, but getting at attitudes can be harder.
Sure it can, but I tell you, this is a great start. I mean, society has kind of, you know, come a long way. I mean, this is a civil rights victory that's happened in our lifetime. And when I talk to young people today, you know, when I go to a high school, they are so beyond this. I mean, it's so affirming. I mean, I'm older. I'm not that much older, but you know, as a 46-year-old man, to see kids in high school who are well beyond this, and we're fighting the fight now for transgender and for two-spirited. Ultimately, we fight for the same things. As different as many of these things are, it's about being who you are and being celebrated and respected in society for that.
Let me ask you one last question, and it's looking at other jurisdictions. New Zealand has gone some way down the road of an apology compensation. Australia, did you look at those experiences and decide that Canada needed to go farther? As Doug Elliott, again, the lawyer today, said, the settlement is larger than anywhere else.
I don't think it's you know, I don't mean to be glib here. I don't think it's a race or a competition. I mean, I think that what we came up with was, you know, in talking to the people who have suffered systemic discrimination, we came to a just settlement. I think this was right for us. I think this is right for Canada.
All right, Seamus ORegan, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
That's Seamus ORegan. We'll have more reaction to today's apology a bit later in the show. But first, a U.S. conservative group tries to prove the Washington Post is full of fake news, and it completely falls apart. We'll tell you about that story right after this.